welcome back to Film on High. This is Decca.
This is Alex.
And today we're going to talk about the film Raging Bull. Directed by Martin Scorsese, this came out in 1980, and this is an American boxing biopic starring Robert De Niro, Joe Pesci, Cathy, Moriarty, and Frank Vincent. In this story, this is a complex story of a boxing champion named Jake LaMotta, where he started from the underground, basically rose the ranks to become the middleweight champion of the world. But unfortunately, his insecurities started to creep up on him, and as slowly but surely as we see through the film, it got the better of him, and we got to see the rise and the fall of a great boxer mired by basically his rage. And so pride begets the fall. So what do you think of the film?
Well, to put it fairly succinctly, this is a monumental, staggering achievement of cinema, and it quite possibly represents the creative zenith of the partnership of Scorsese and De Niro. This film in particular, I feel like, is really a product of the two of them. Obviously, Scorsese and De Niro had worked together before this, right from, really Scorsese's big screen debut, Mean Streets. He'd made movies before that, but Mean Streets was kind of his first big movie. De Niro was a star in that, and then Taxi Driver, which was obviously another masterpiece. And then Scorsese's career kind of fell into a bit of a slump. He made another movie with De Niro called New York, New York, which was kind of a period musical kind of movie with Liza Minnelli. That one didn't do very well, and Scorsese himself started kind of having personal problems, substance abuse problems. He was never a really healthy person. He suffered from asthma during a lot of his life. He had a bit of a frail countenance. And he started getting really heavy into substances like cocaine and pills and a lot of these things that were very popular during the late 70s, as you can imagine. And he had some kind of medical thing. He had maybe an overdose or something happened to him where he got very, very ill and he nearly died. And De Niro had been pestering Scorsese for a while about making this film. It was actually De Niro's baby in a lot of ways. He first read the book on Jake LaMotta when he was making Godfather 2, and he was really enamored with the character, and he wanted to make this movie. Scorsese wasn't interested because he's not a person who's really interested in sports or boxing, so it wasn't something he wanted to do. But then when Scorsese had hit this kind of personal turmoil and he was very ill and in the hospital, he felt like he could finally relate to this material, not necessarily the boxing aspect, but more the self-destructive aspect of Jake LaMotta's kind of character. So he finally felt like he was prepared to approach the film, and the two of them went into it together. And it was kind of a big deal for Scorsese too, because he almost approached this movie like it was going to be his last film. I think because he'd gone through a health scare and kind of a film that hadn't done very well, he was maybe a bit pessimistic. And he wasn't even thinking that the film was going to be a great success because, biopic and stuff like that. But he really threw himself into it, and the film is just sublime. On the technical side and the directorial side that Scorsese was handling, it's brilliant. He shot the film in black and white, for one thing, which is kind of appropriate for the era it's set in. The film kind of charts a period from the early 40s to the I think the early 1960s, kind of this 20-year or so period in Jake LaMotta's life as he rose and fell, so to speak. And yeah, he uses this brilliant black and white cinematography, and it's very stark, and especially during the boxing scenes where there's a lot of lighting and smoke and interesting uses of effects, slow motion, fast motion, using low angles to kind of capture. It's very vivid and very well shot, and it's especially remarkable for a man who wasn't into boxing or sport. He was still able to really capture the hard-hitting nature of the sport. Obviously they took some liberties. It's very cinematic. Some of it's very drawn out. It's not some of it doesn't necessarily look like realistic boxing, but they kind of took the artistic liberty. And then of course there's De Niro's part of it. De Niro's physical transformation for this part is the stuff of legends. It's the thing that many people have spoken about. De Niro, he was always a very method conscious actor. Like he liked to immerse himself in his characters. He liked to kind of do the things his characters were doing. Like when he did Taxi Driver, he really did drive a cab. When he did The Godfather 2, he was in Italy learning the languages, getting kind of... So for this film, he really dove into it. Like, he got himself into amazing physical shape, like probably the best physical shape of his life, and you can see it in the film how lean and lithe he is, like a panther. And he just was this perfect kind of middleweight boxing shape, and he trained and boxed extensively. The real Jake LaMotta trained him and advised him, and he even said that De Niro could have maybe gone pro himself if he would have chosen boxing as a career. He was like that capable and that dedicated. And so he does this, and he captures the real like prime of Jake LaMotta's boxing years with this amazing physicality. And then later to capture LaMotta when he's in his more kind of his later years where he'd kind of fallen into hard times, De Niro put on a ton of weight. He bloated himself up to well over 200 pounds. And that's like an amazing thing to do, like it's for just to go through that. And he was, not only that, after it was done, he shed the weight, went back to his normal weight, went back to making movies. But it's just really amazing to witness that and for him to just embody the nature of the character. And De Niro in this film is truly remarkable because even in this film, compared to a lot of his other films, this is a singular performance. Like, De Niro's done a lot of work in his career, you know, credit to him. He's known for playing kind of gangster type roles. Those are the kind of roles he played often in Scorsese films. But in this film, he feels like a different person. Like even his physicality and his hair, like he's got this kind of really curly hair that's blown up. Like he doesn't look like himself. He looks like a different person. And he captures this really frightening... Like, you get the sense that this guy is a caged animal. He's scary, and he can go off at any time, and he's unpredictable. Like, even you compare it to, like, Travis Bickle in Taxi Driver. Like, Travis was unstable, and he was frightening in his own way, but he was vulnerable, you know? There was a softness to his character. This is a different kind of thing of a man who's out of control. He's mired in his own egotism, his jealousy, his pride, and the way all of these things combine. Like, the film is very... Like, obviously, it's a biopic, but I'm sure they took their share of liberties, although it's worth mentioning that Jake LaMotta was involved in the production, like I said, so he was kind of signing off on all of this, but they really kind of emphasize the themes of violence, like bravado, like male kind of violence, in the boxing kind of, within the context of the boxing world, and, like, the sexual jealousy that Jake goes through, and how that kind of simultaneously fuels him and destroys him in some ways. Like you said, he's a character that's full of rage. He has this endless kind of reservoir of rage, and it serves him very well in the ring. And Jake LaMotta in real life, he was known for being very tough. Like, he could take a lot of punishment, and even when he didn't win bouts, he would usually knock down his opponents, or, you know, he would stay standing. Like, he was a hard guy to bring down. And the film really conveys that with just him taking this endless punishment and giving it out. But then it starts to eat him alive, and it starts to turn him against his loved ones, his brother, his wife, and that's kind of the slow implosion and destruction of everything in his world. Like, it's a brilliant character study and a very kind of disturbing portrait of a certain kind of destructive male, like, insecurity, like all of these different things. Like, it's hard to even put a label on it. Like, it is a boxing film, but the boxing is sort of used as a vehicle to convey these ideas, you know?
No, exactly. And to add on to this point, if you know anything about boxing or fighting in the context of sportsmanship and stuff, you look at a guy like Jake LaMotta, and you could theoretically compare him to like Mike Tyson in the sense of like the brutality that he brings into the ring, where he's just there to fight his opponent, but fight his opponent as if it's his last fight type of thing. And
yeah,
that's something that is really interesting to me, because having been in the ring itself and knowing people that have been in the ring, you are always in the potential of real danger, real potential life-threatening fatality, you could say, because anything can happen in a ring. You could lose an eye, you could get your nose broken to a point where it just stays crooked. You could have brain fog, which is something that really comes up in this movie, even in the beginning, where we get this beautiful shot of Jake just being in the ring. And just as you mentioned, it was like, there are so many ways to look at it. One way is to look at it as he's fighting himself in the ring. Another way it could be that this whole foggy scenario is just kind of like him lost in his own fog, as you mentioned, is this rage that's outpouring out of him because maybe, yes, he thinks of himself like, I'm the tough guy, I can fight in the ring, I can be the boxer, I can be the champion. But there are 3 times something happens where you get to see that the opportunity that he wants, because of his jealousy, because of the emotions that he can't control inside, and he lets it just kind of out, always loses him the biggest parts of himself, you know? And that, seeing that to be real life as a biopic, and with the man himself just being like, it's okay, you can talk about this type of story, as you mentioned. It's a story of reckoning, it's the story of redemption, but as the outside viewpoint of such a relentless and talented boxer, for his whole life to be gone and destroyed, it's kind of like, is this the sacrifice to success? Yeah,
it's a very revealing and intimate and brave portrait. And LaMotta himself, he was obviously a great boxer. He was a middleweight champion of the world. He did, his ambitions paid off, and he could definitely, he could back it up. But at the same time, he was a very troubled man. Like, he was violent towards women. He was just generally violent. Like, he would push things further in the ring. His personal life was very, very kind of troubled and destructive and a lot of bad things. And in a way, like, the film and the novel it's based on, well, the book it's based on, the biographical book, like, it almost feels like a reckoning of him kind of facing up to that. Like, this guy who has admittedly done a lot of bad things in his life, and sort of being able to face up to that and present it in an honest way. Like, it's different than most biopics, because you have this kind of real revealing, naked, like almost uncomfortable closeness to the subject. And I think that was something that was of great interest to De Niro in particular, and something that drew him to playing the character, not just the physicality and the boxing aspect, but, like, I read this story in a De Niro biography a while back, and, it was an unauthorized biography, so this could be apocryphal, who knows. But apparently when they were trying to get the movie made, Martin Scorsese and De Niro went to this meeting with the studio heads, and Scorsese did most of the talking. De Niro was silent, because De Niro is a very kind of reclusive, almost shy person. He doesn't like to talk much, doesn't give interviews, he's all about his craft. So during this meeting, Scorsese was doing most of the talking, and the studio head was like, well, you really want us to make this movie about this guy? Like, he beats up his wife, he's a cockroach. That's the word the guy used to describe him. And then De Niro spoke up and he said, he's not a cockroach. Like, that was the one thing De Niro said during the meeting. Like, even though this guy, he's a bad man or he's done bad things, there's a humanity to him, a tortured humanity. And it's something that De Niro was willing to tap into, Like, it's not just this kind of grotesque portrait of this kind of disgusting person, but at the same time, it's not like it's not a cop-out. Like, it's not an excuse. Like, it's dealing with the ugliness of it, obviously doing it in a way that's still palatable for the audience, but just this, like, incredible portrayal of just, like, you don't see this kind of thing, like, in many movies where an actor is willing to push themselves to this level. Like, a lot of people have copied De Niro, they've followed in his footsteps. Like, in this film in particular, I think this inspired, like, a whole generation of actors. But he just really, like, captures this transformation, like, transforming into this character and being willing to go to all of those dark places,
One of my favorite scenes from the film, we're gonna get into spoiler territory, but it's the scene where, I don't remember if exactly it was the mob who said this, but he was supposed to take a dive for his first shot at the middleweight class type of thing.
Yeah.
And so, right after taking the dive, and you see it in the fight, he's just like, come on, fight me, type of thing, but he's just too tough for this guy. And so, it's unrealistic for the audience to see that, oh, this guy genuinely lost to this guy. everybody knew it that it was just kind of a con.
Yeah,
so,
they knew it was a fix.
Exactly, and so right after that, we cut to the locker room, and he's just fucking crying and stuff, and even his coach breaks down as well because you understand.
He's consoling him, like, yeah,
But it's deeper than that, because when in a fight or intellectual fight, whatever it is, when you're competing and you have to lose just to protect something that you love or something like that, or to make a smart choice, sometimes you just want to say, damn the smart choice, be an idiot and go for it, because that's the opportunity of a lifetime that many of us, it's a chance of a lifetime that many of us don't usually get, or if we do get, sometimes it can slip by, and in hindsight we look back to it and we're like, fuck, that really was.
Yeah, it's a betrayal of himself, you know, and that's like the interesting thing about the not only Jake's character, but his whole journey in this kind of world of boxing. Interestingly enough, when the movie begins, we see him losing. Like, the first match we see him having, the first bout, is actually the first loss that he ever suffered in 1941. So that's an interesting way to kind of introduce the character, him having to deal with that, and that being kind of a source of his insecurities going forward. And from there, we see the kind of rise where he's moving up from there and becoming the middleweight champion. But yeah, there's like, it's like he's conditioned to win. Like, you know, he wants to destroy his opponent, he wants to take them down, and he wants to be the victor. But it's more complicated than that. There's compromises, and that's where kind of the shadier element comes in, where the mob, basically, like you said. Like, I think LaMotta was involved with the Mafia in real life. You know, the Mafia were pretty much involved in everything back then, boxing, entertainment. They were more of a presence back during that era. Yeah. And, the suggestion, basically, they tell him straight up, like, he's not going to make it without us. Like, he's not going to have a shot at that heavyweight title just, like, you know, it's not just him. You know, you can't do it yourself. You need us. You need people backing you up. So just this idea that he has to play ball with them, and he has to do something that flies in the face of his own personal belief, you know, like, it's a betrayal of himself as a fighter, and that's why he's breaking down to that point. And yeah, again, like, tempering like that kind of anger and rage with a strange kind of vulnerability, but it's like, it's a childish kind of thing almost, you know, he's crying like a baby, but again, like, being willing to go to those places, and yeah, you kind of understand him at the same time because of the sacrifice that's necessary for him to go through all this. And yeah, like, that aspect of the film is interesting. Like, the Mafia presence is in the film, but I think they downplayed it. Like, I think Scorsese didn't want this to be a mob film. Like, he specifically wanted this to be a film about LaMotta and the boxing and that. So the mob kind of has a smaller presence compared to his other films. And instead we focus more on Jake's relationships. Like, mainly his relationship with his brother Joey, who's also kind of his trainer and his manager, and his wife Vicky. And how this kind of all, like, that's the real driving force of the plot, like the real crux. And how even as Jake is winning and he's rising up in this kind of world of boxing, like, the more he becomes a champion, the more that he destroys everything, and he becomes, like, more obnoxious, more childish, more insecure. Like, his obsession with his wife Vicky especially, like, for one thing, he meets her early on in the film. She's only 15 years old, so right away he's doing something unethical. Like, you know, obviously it was a different era back then, but he's going after an underage girl, and he's dragging her into his orbit, and he leaves his previous wife for her. Like, we see him in the early scenes, he's got a wife that he's arguing with, so she just kind of disappears from the film, and now he's with Vicky. And, like, yeah, she's, like, their relationship is really twisted, because, like, for one thing, she's basically still a kid, you know, like, he's pulling her into this world. She doesn't know any better. She's probably never really been in a real relationship before, and now she's getting married to this guy and being pulled along in this journey, and just becoming the target of his insane jealousy, where everything she says is, like, almost like potential for more, like, calamity, more insecurity, more jealousy. Like, most notably, she comments on one of his opponents, Tony De Niro, being good looking, and this completely enrages Jake. Like, it haunts his mind. And then when he finally gets into the fight with Gennaro, he demolishes him, and he goes for the face, smashing him, like, basically demolishes his nose. Like, he wants to destroy the good looks, like, just that pathological rage. And it's a very ugly and hideous thing, but you know, like, you understand it in a way, like, because we're all capable of that kind of rage, but this idea that Jake, he's in a place where he doesn't have to temper it, like, you know, the boxing ring especially, like, when he's in the ring, all bets are off.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the interesting part of this film, is that when you get highly trained people in the ring, you know, as we've seen before, as we've mentioned before, the canvas, you know, you paint it through blood, sweat, tears, you fight to the well, not to the death, but almost to the end. And that's 12 to 13 rounds of two guys fighting in the ring. And I like how Scorsese captured those moments in the ring. As you mentioned, the first fight, he loses, and you can kind of see the disorientation with like camera flashes, the announcer basically announcing everything at the exact minute that it's happening. So it's all confusing. It's high speed. It's highly kinetic, but at the same time, you kind of get to slow down into it, because De Niro is able to not only embody becoming a boxer and a fearful boxer, but or fearless boxer, but at the same time, you can always see exactly who's he taking serious, who's he actually kind of like, okay, this is just another fight. Just like you mentioned with the guy that, you know, got called good looking and stuff.
Yeah,
you
Tony
can
De Niro.
see it's just that cold, that very, very cold rage that just comes out, where I'm just gonna beat the shit out of you. I'm not gonna say anything. I'm not even gonna look at you. But right after he beats him up, he looks to the crowd, sees his wife, and just looks at her. It's like, how's
Exactly.
he
Yeah.
you know? So,
and we see him fight quite a few fighters too. Marcel Cerdan, Sugar Ray Robinson, who was maybe his most famous opponent. So we do get like a decent idea of his career. Like, another great thing that Scorsese does is about midway through the film, he uses a really great montage where he introduces color into the film, where we get a montage of Jake's victories as he's kind of beating all these guys, mostly rendered through still images, and it's intercut with home video footage and color of Jake with his family, with his wife. We see them having children. We see his brother Jake having a wife too, and kind of the growth of their family. And it's a really beautiful montage, and it obviously kind of sets the stage for the downfall that's going to follow that. And yeah, it's really sometimes hard to watch and disturbing, like the places that Jake goes, the places that De Niro goes with this character, and how it destroys everything around him, and like the jealousy for his wife, of his wife potentially having affairs with other men, just gets worse and worse. And eventually he starts to suspect that his own brother may be having an affair with her, and that's really kind of what leads to the final straw in a way, and the destruction of their relationship finally. And Joey was a very important part of Jake's life and his career, so the loss of Joey is a pretty serious one, but his career does continue after that, but there's kind of an unmistakable downturn. And from that point on, we really do see him plunging to his lowest depths. And it's an interesting portrayal too, because in a lot of sports movies, you'll have the fighter, he goes down, and usually a boxing movie or a fighting movie, or it ends in one big final fight. He has a chance to come back and be triumphant again, but none of that in this movie. Like, Jake won. He came out of it, he's made a lot of money, he did well, his wife is still with him in spite of everything, but he's still he's just become almost like a parody of himself. For one thing, he was a guy that never had much. You get the sense that there wasn't much he could do in life besides fight, so now that he can't fight anymore, he's reduced to doing really bad stand-up comedy and recitations at his nightclub, and that ends up getting him further into trouble when he gets busted by the Vice Squad for some shadier behavior he's involved in. So it's a really it's almost like the punchline of the joke, this is what you fought for, this is where you're at. And I love that kind of it's a really moving finale, but at the same time there's no cheap sentimentality. You mentioned that in a way the film could be seen as a redemption film. In some ways, the redemption, him reckoning and being forced to deal with all that, but it's not done in a stupid, cheesy, sappy Hollywood way, which is great. They really take you to the depths with this guy, and in the end you're kind of left, it's really up to you to make up your own mind how you feel about him, I suppose. what kind of man is he? Like, is he even capable of redemption? Is he worth forgiving or anything like that? But it's just so beautifully rendered by De Niro and Scorsese. And not to give all the praise to them either, we should also mention Joe Pesci. This was one of his first big roles. I think he'd done some other small stuff before this. But I think De Niro or Scorsese, one of them, they saw some of his work or they knew him and they just brought him in, and it all kicked off from there. Like, right from this role, you could see how great he was. That kind of manic intensity, that the same things that would characterize his later performances in films like Goodfellas and Home Alone and things like that. You see it on display here, and just a wonderful character dynamic between him and De Niro. Like, you really get the sense of them being brothers and their kind of relationship. And the Joey character is interesting too, because he's kind of, even though he's kind of more sensible than Jake in some ways, he's also flawed. Like, he doesn't treat his wife very well. He's kind of like, he's violent himself. Like, he's impulsive. Like, you can kind of see how they have their similarities, but he kept Jake kind of grounded. And once he sort of disappears from Jake's life, like, yeah, that's when it spirals out of control. And of course, Cathy Moriarty, who makes her debut here playing Vicky, she came in just basically, I think they just found her and brought her into the movie, and her performance is so kind of believable, because on one hand, like, we've seen this kind of character before, this, like, the victim of abuse, the kind of battered wife in some ways, but she doesn't, like, submit to kind of cliches of crying or whimpering. Like, the character does have her own strength. She does stand up to Jake and hold her own. And for, like, a novice actress, she was able to hold her ground with De Niro and Joe Pesci pretty well. So it was a remarkable performance. She was nominated for the Oscar for it. So those three performances are what really hold the film up, and it's just, like, fantastic. It's a different kind of Scorsese film. Like, I even think, looking in the broader context of his entire career, he kind of hit something deeper here. Like, the film has a slower pace than a lot of his other movies. It's just the whole, the presentation of it, the black and white, the music, like a lot of, like, the Cavalleria Rusticana, the intermezzo from the Italian opera, and this kind of really beautiful, like, old ethnic sort of music that suits the film really well. He was really going for something singular here, and he pulled it off, I would say, flawlessly.
With a movie like this, what the highlights of the film are the characterization of champions and their downfalls or the downwind type of thing, because we did have a conversation about what happens when, instead of a fighter kind of like Mike Tyson, Muhammad Ali, George Foreman, all these types of people that we know and behold, the other fighters that could have been contenders, like, what happened to them and what are their stories? And I think LaMotta speaks on both of their stories of, the once true champion type of thing to the one who lost to Sugar Ray, but still had a pride to himself, telling himself, like, I'm still standing, you haven't beaten me. And so with that type of mindset, it's like, if you're never beaten in your mind, then anything that happens to you is never a loss, technically. But as we see throughout the film, and we get to the punchline of the film, as you mentioned, the end point where he just looks in the mirror, looks at himself, and tells himself, like, no, you lost. Like, honestly, at this point, it's like you're at the lowest point of your life, and then he starts pumping himself up just like he did back in the ring and stuff. So with that, it's just, it makes the sad decision of showing, like, as you mentioned, sacrifice, the whole success type of thing. It's a really steep road, and in order to maintain it, you have to kind of deal with the shit that you're going through yourself. And back in those days, we didn't have a psychologist or time for psychologists. Everybody was going through the World War II and stuff. It was a really hard time for everybody, so no one was there to help, really, except, like you mentioned, Joey, where he was basically his rock, his whole anchor. But at a time, people lose their connections through stupid ass mistakes, and it usually sucks. A lot of us have gone through those types of things, whether it be with relationships or family. But what LaMotta basically explains is that, look, you may fuck up really, really bad in life, but can you kind of push yourself to try to become a better person? And I think that's the point of the movie that is trying to say is, it's like, as you mentioned, this guy was a dirtbag in some people's eyes. He was a winner in other people's eyes. It's really up to you to decide, but all stalls are around. This is one of my favorite boxing movies, just because as a fighter, not a lot of people get to talk about it and stuff, and get to talk about what people's psyche is in the actual ring itself. And this one shows it without saying it.
Yeah, that kind of deeper look, because, like I said, most boxing movies, they tend to be, or fighting movies, they tend to be more feel-good stories. Like, there needs to be an underdog, there needs to be, like, some kind of, like, big fight, like, something like that. But in this film, it's very much like, it's more about what happens when you manage to win and achieve your goals, but ultimately your flaws still kind of eat you up. There's really no escaping some things. And just as like a portrait of self-destruction, as a portrait of like a man that you may not want to know in real life, but is still very fascinating, his life, and like the kind of message you get from it and the whole metaphor of it. It's very powerful, and it's a very singular film. Like, even in Scorsese's filmography, I think this movie stands particularly tall. Some people may not like it because, again, it's different than his other movies. Like, if you've seen Goodfellas or Casino and then you go back and you watch this one, it's a different vibe. But, like, again, when you consider the story they're telling and where they were kind of at in their lives, like, I mentioned Scorsese going through that whole personal thing, like, you can feel the anguish and like the real pain that permeates this film. And like, I guess when you pass through that much pain and darkness, there always has to be some kind of light at the end of the tunnel, for Jake LaMotta, for Martin Scorsese, for all of us ultimately.
This movie also does remind me of The Wolf of Wall Street, in this structure of like somebody that was great but had a great fall.
Yeah.
And funny enough, again, it's directed by Scorsese, so he was able to bring out this type of story twice. Not in a row, but throughout his filmography.
Well, yes.
He was able to bring it,
Scorsese loves to do that kind of thing. Like, Goodfellas and Casino were also about that. The kind of people who had it all, and then they fucked it up, and they had their downfall. But in the case of, like, The Wolf of Wall Street and Casino and Goodfellas and movies like that, it's more of, like, a criminal organization, a bigger kind of thing. This is more like one man's journey, It's more of an intimate portrait, which is one thing I like about it. And you can definitely see a lot of Scorsese's signature touches, but he was going, like, even for him, he was going out on a limb on this one. You could tell that he was trying to do something different, and it was a movie that was like a hard sell. Like, even just making a fucking black and white movie in general, like, studios hate that. Like, in today's day and age, they'll almost never let you do it. But Scorsese, he made the film, and it wasn't like, it was well received, but over time, its reputation just grew and grew. Like, now it's really up there as one of Scorsese's best. And I have to go ahead and I have to give it 5 out of 5 because it's a masterpiece. It's a truly great film. A great, like, I hesitate almost to call it a boxing film, but like, it's a great boxing film, great character portrait, a great example of a cinematic master truly coming into his craft.
Yeah, I have to give it a 5 out of 5 myself. I love the story. I love the story of Jake LaMotta, but as a boxing movie as well, Scorsese was able to capture that visceral action that usually happens, where the sound crunches, the punches landing on the face, the disorientation, and basically just the high octane thrill of it all, just the whole testosterone thrill of it all. Just makes you, just by watching it vicariously, you kind of feel like yourself into the ring and fighting with these people. So in order to do something like that, even though he didn't like boxing, he made his research and understanding what boxing is to a person. So, have you seen the movie? What'd you think about it? Let us know in the comments down below. Rate us all the type of Scorsese films that you like, and what's the best ones you find that is, and what do you find about Jake LaMotta's story that relates to you or that you find is wrong to you. But either way, Until then, this has been Film on High.
Peace.
Later.